You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we are very excited to welcome in Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp Video Group, a national law firm growth company, author, public speaker, investor, entrepreneur, and the list goes on. Michael, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. It's finally cool to chat on here and get you on the show.
Well, I'm very, very grateful. I know we were talking about it before. It's like we've been seeing each other's stuff for a while, and we corresponded through emails and messages and DMs and all this stuff. And now we're face to face. So now, the only thing missing is we've got to meet in person. Sort
of face to face. It's like computer screen, but it's crazy. I'm telling you, like it is. I've definitely experienced like the whole different world through social media, especially with like the launch of Lawyer Stories and everybody that I've met. So it is really kind of really cool to have you on here, and you're doing some amazing things, and I want to talk about it. So first, I just want to say that I've worked with some of your staff. I want to give them a shout out. Emily, Alyssa, Robert, good people. They've made things seamless. So I could definitely see why you're, Crisp would be like one of the best places to work in Atlanta, because these people are doing a really good job.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and they were complimenting me on all these things that we've done at Crisp, and what I shared with them just in response to like just all of that success that they see is the only reason I think that people think of me or whatever they think of and the success they regard Crisp with is because we've got an amazing team that makes all this stuff work. So like, for example, like we've got 2 workshops today taking place in the training center, 2 coaching workshops. I have nothing to do with that, right? They're like setting that whole place up. They're conducting the workshops. They got everybody there. They handle all the travel, all the logistics, and that stuff's happening while at the same time we've got client calls going on, people traveling to different markets. But that's a testament to those people, right? I would say if anything, like I, perhaps did an okay job of attracting those individuals and engaging them and getting them to kind of buy into the vision. But it's really, you take them out of the equation and I'm nothing special.
Yeah, but it is hard to find good help. So you did a good job doing that. So congrats on, having a nice staff. And I appreciate all everybody that I've encountered at Crisp. And I also want to take a time to thank you on behalf of Lawyer Stories for being very supportive of us. I know you tell stories via these like beautiful videos, but we're like a little thing that we started as a passion project, and now it's sort of a business. It's an LLC. But I want to thank you guys a lot because I appreciate you taking an interest in us and like working with us, and that means a lot to me personally, and the couple of people that we have working here for us.
Yeah. So I think you're doing important work. So, even with our organization, it was founded on storytelling and what you're doing. To show that, they're more than just lawyers, right? These are people with families. These are people that had overcome adversity. There's a reason why they do what they do. It's not just providing legal services. Everybody has different reasons.
We all have the reasons, right? That's sort of a good segue because, we are Lawyer Stories, so we like to tell the story. Obviously, like you have an amazing, successful company, but tell us a little bit about your stories, like your journey, your background, you came from, you immigrated first of all, right? You immigrated from where?
Yeah. So, man, this might be like taboo to say. I got to be careful because, so I've been saying Eastern Europe lately.
Okay.
But my family and I, so we immigrated from Russia. They were escaping, basically refugees. We were escaping religious persecution.
Yeah.
So, my parents and I are Jewish, and when we came over to the U.S.,
all right, Shabbat Shalom.
There you go. Right
on,
fellow mensch.
Shabbat shalom. All right.
That's right. That's right. So they basically, my family, and it was my parents, my grandparents, my brother and I, we immigrated to the US when I was 4 years old. My brother was 1. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a nurse. But when they came to America, those degrees didn't transfer. So they had to, they basically had to start over, and they didn't speak the language. My dad became a mechanic. My mom was a hairdresser, and they had $500 to their name. And I can't even imagine like now, just because I'm around the same age that my parents were when they came to America, but to come over to a new country, and they were doing well, in Russia, but to start over, no money, not speaking the language, you got 2 parents to support and then 2 young children to support. That takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting to see, like, when we get to that age where our parents were, it'd be like, wow, like you had to do this when you were this age. So you had $500 to your family's name. You did get a degree. You went to college. Was it Georgia, right?
That's right. I went to Georgia. I was pre-med, took the MCAT. I spent a lot of time shadowing doctors. I got into medical school. I actually got into a few medical schools.
Really? Okay.
But this is a very important lesson that I learned then, because I was very entrepreneurial growing up. Yes. And, if you've got, basically immigrant, like Jewish parents, like your options are basically doctor or lawyer, right? Like one of those two. There's really not a third option. But I was very entrepreneurial. I had a web design company when I was, 13 years old, and I was always kind of like doing something entrepreneurial as a kid. But I went to school for, I was a biology major. I went to school pre-med, took the MCAT, got into med school. But one of the things after spending probably over 100 hours shadowing doctors is I realized that I don't know that this is for me. Again, being entrepreneurial, it just didn't.
But that's a very mature, that's a very difficult thing to realize, because a lot of people would have just taken that path, and it's a very mature thing to figure out. I mean, you're basically like, I know you've had like Gary V at like last conference. Like, I'm a big Gary V guy. Like, I haven't really learned like the NFT things, but like sort of the motivation kept me going with lawyer stories and like a lot of the stuff that he said, and a lot of, so it's interesting. Did you guys like connect like right away? Like, you have a similar sort of story, right?
So it's interesting because like when we had Gary, so we've had him at the last couple conferences. Interestingly enough, my dad connected with Gary first, right? So Gary's walking around or something, and my dad stopped them, and Gary speaks Russian, so they spoke, and then when we were backstage, we were talking about it. It's interesting in the sense that you say that like, hey, that was such an important lesson to learn. I think in hindsight today it was, but when I made the decision that I basically put in for a deferral, I said, before I go to med school, I'm going to take a year off. Like, it's not for me. And This was in 2008. So I went from basically being an honors like graduate, except medical school, to basically the economy collapsing and me working at a dive bar. I was working at Taco Mac, waiting tables. So at the time, I actually had this conversation with my mom yesterday. She's cutting hair. She's still a hairdresser, and she's having like clients come in, and they're asking about her children, and they're asking about her son, Michael, who was, went to school pre-med, got into med school, and they're like, well, what's he up to? And she kind of had to, change the conversation, because to say, oh, he decided not to go and he's waiting tables at this dive bar. Wow. It would have been like, what happened?
Is that place still around? Like, if I come to Atlanta, I'd love to.
I think so. And I'll tell you, probably the same people still work there. It was, I think it was an important experience. I actually grew up waiting tables, so I always had a summer job, and I naturally gravitated to that. It wasn't for me about something glamorous. It was about the fact that I had to make money to support myself. So, and that just happened to be the place where I could get hired. So ironically, I went from there washing dishes at this dive bar to washing lab equipment at the CDC, like the Centers for Disease Control. And then I spent a couple of years there. I was able to learn and grow a lot. I got back into the web design stuff. I started learning a lot of different like skills. I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I'll go back, to med school, or I'll get an MBA or whatever it is. But none of that, for whatever reason, it didn't feel right for me. So I bought a camera. I figured it'd be like a nice lifetime skill to learn how to take pictures. And what was a hobby became a business. I had a photography company. The photography company evolved into a video company. This was largely in like hospitality. So like bars, restaurants, events, Live Nation, that sort of thing. And then that business evolved into a focus on our corporate clients, which became Crisp. So that was kind of the evolution of what led to Crisp starting.
So I'm still a little bit curious about the evolution, because you have a terrific video on your website, by the way. For whoever's listening, go look at the website and you can see Michael's story. You went to like 21 people, 22 different people. You thought the 22 was going to be a bust. You got a phone call. You're sitting there in your kitchen, looking a little lachrymose, and all of a sudden you get this call and you're busting your butt out there. You get pulled over on your way to the site where you're supposed to. So like right before that, like tell me, like before you started in with the video, what were you like? What was the job right before you just said, "Hey, I'm going to do video"?
Yeah. So I was, so this is while I was still working at the CDC. When I got a camera and I started taking pictures, I was out taking pictures of like plants and things like that. Like, just to learn. And a buddy of mine that I went to high school with, he was a bartender at this nightclub, and he said, "Hey, you should come by and take photos at this nightclub." And I didn't know anything about nightclubs or anything. And he's like, "Oh, we'll pay $100 or something." I'm like, "What, $100?" And I'm like, "What time do I arrive?" Thinking like 7, 8 o'clock or something, PM. And he's like, "We'll get here at midnight." And I'm like, "Wait, it starts at midnight?" He's like, "Yes, it starts at midnight. It goes to 3 a.m. So I'm like, "Okay." And I show up at this nightclub, and again, I had this is not a scene that I was familiar with. And I'm ready to take pictures, and I see this huge line out front. I walk up with my camera bag and everything, and I go to the front, and I'm like, "I'm here to take pictures." And I'll never forget the first experience I had in this industry. As soon as I said I'm here to take photos, there was another photographer that was working that night who comes up to me, like I'm still outside, and he says, "We're good. I'm taking photos tonight. You can go home." So I turn around. I'm like, "Okay, I guess they're good." And as I'm like about to walk to my car, I'm like, "Wait a second," right? Like, I was asked to show up. So I turn back around. I go in there. I take pictures. That night when I came home, it was after 3 a.m. I process all the photos. I send them the photos. They like them so much. They're like, "Come back next Friday." So they basically turn into like a regular thing.
What was the deal with that other dude who was like, he probably wasn't even hired. He was probably just going in to take photos.
I don't know. But I guess just a lesson in like, don't be discouraged, right? Don't take no for an answer.
I like that.
And so every Friday became every Saturday. And then I realized, I'm like, well, I can't be in 2 places at once, because, there's other venues in Atlanta. So then I start like hiring photographers who are like college students. And we start this company, you're basically taking pictures all around these, these nightlife bars and restaurants. And, this is a brutal industry to work in. I mean, just brutal. It was very tough to get paid. You're fighting for every dollar. Half of the clients you work with, they go out of business every 6 months, right? Because there's a lot of turnover in the bar and restaurant scene. If it rains or there's like bad weather, on a given night, like then it's somehow like your fault, right? Because the turnout is much lower. But it's
so you had people going to the bars like in your company, like around.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I would get calls at 2 or 3 in the morning when I have photographers. They're like, "This person didn't show up," or "This person, like, I don't know, there was some issue, their camera broke, like they bumped into somebody." It was a nightmare. Like, it was an absolute nightmare.
Do you remember?
So it got up to, I think at a point we had like, I think it was like about 15. We hit a point where we had what I believe was probably around like 80% of the market share of like the bars and restaurants in Atlanta. And even at the time, I mean, I'm still broke. Like I have 80% of the market share, but let's say we're getting paid $100 and I pay the photographer $75 and it leaves me with $25. And of course we have multiple venues. But then we're also having to like market the company. So I'm not doing well, even though we're everywhere.
So that was right before you sat down and you called these 22.
Yeah, so the realization was, I realized I was sitting at the wrong table. So like meaning like I was working really hard, but like in this industry, the majority of them wouldn't even wake up till noon.
So that was my next question. Like when you were calling those 22 people, was it all lawyers? Like what industry was that you decided to call? And like, how did you get those leads?
So that was anything. I mean, so the idea then was that like, I got to get out of this nightlife bar and restaurant scene, right? I think I felt that we were working really smart. We were working very hard, but we were just sitting at the wrong table, right? Like we had to kind of shift to something else. So I looked at who was our ideal client, which at the time was like a corporate client. So I said, well, let's create this like corporate video brand, which would have been Crisp, but I need clients. So I'm calling on anyone. Like Benny, it didn't matter. It could be, I'll do a bar mitzvah, a soccer tournament. We'll film at a hotel. We'll film, at a dentist's office,
right.
An audiologist. Makes no difference because at the time, like we weren't niching down, right? Like I didn't really know that concept. I really didn't know much about running a business then. It was just to get it off the ground. And I'm hearing no. And by the way, these weren't just phone calls like, hey, can we go out and shoot a video for you? I would do these in-person meetings. It's kind of funny to think about because like I would be pitching the idea of video, like digital video, and people were like, we're not so sure about this because this is 2012.
Right.
YouTube isn't what it is today. And then like Facebook and the social platforms aren't what they are. But at the time, everyone's like, there's no future in digital video. You're not going to be able to compete with the agencies. It's all TV. So when I'm doing these meetings, these are like in-person meetings that I like fought to get. And I'd spend like this long meeting kind of explaining the power of video to give us a chance. And I'm getting nope. And look, I think at a point, it was after like 13 rejections, like 13 in-person meetings. I call my dad and I'm like, Dad, I've been rejected 13 times, hoping that at that point I'm going to get some encouragement, like keep going. Right. He's like, nah, man, you got to shut it down. You got to go back to med school.
So what kept you going? Like what kept you going through those no's?
So, I've thought a lot about this. I think for me, it was, and honestly, I don't know how long I would have gone. Like, I know some people, like reasonable people, they stop at like 7 rejections, 13 rejections, 18 rejections, right? Like, at what point is it like, there's not a future here? Maybe it's just a bad idea. What kept me going was the fact that I felt that if I could not figure this out, then I had to go to med school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, because I'm trying to do my own thing here and I'm trying to like build this business because you have like this vision and this dream. And if I couldn't realize that, I felt that if I couldn't make that work, that I would have to resign myself to like somebody else's desires, right? And somebody else's goals or somebody else's vision. And for me, like it was one of those things where like quitting wasn't an option, although it got very, very close. I will say what the moment you described at that 20-second pitch, when I got a speeding ticket on the way there, one on the way back, I was already broke as hell. I mean, I had less than $500 to my name at the time, and I got over $1,000 worth of speeding tickets after 21 rejections. I mean, at that point, I'm like, I think it's time.
Right. And so, like, what was it? Like, what was your, first of all, why not lawyers? Like, it's not, why not law school? Like, you were talking about med school, but you're like, you don't say anything about law school. Did you ever think of doing that as an alternative to med school? And then my follow-up question to that is, what was your big break to know that you can do it?
Yeah, well, so I hadn't thought about the law. I honestly hadn't. For me, it was always kind of either the medical route or like something in tech. Something between one of those two. And even when we later with Chris, we started working with lawyers and now that's all we do. Even that happened by accident. But the big break really was that 20-second pitch. So even after I got those speeding tickets, I'm at a rock bottom moment. Like I think as far low as you can go, like people in my life are basically like everybody at that point. I wouldn't say they abandoned me, but they're like, this dude's crazy, right? Like there's like, you're not going out with your friends. I'm not going to like dinners. I'm not going to lunches. I'm like trying to create this business, Crisp at the time. And they're like, yeah, but we're all getting jobs. We're getting promoted. We're buying homes. We're buying new cars. And you're sitting here like broke. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? You're just getting rejected. And it wasn't that those people so much didn't believe in me. Like, I don't take offense now in hindsight. I think they actually really cared about me and they didn't want me to sit there and struggle and suffer.
Right.
But I think that at that moment, so, the way the story went is the fact that that 20-second pitch, which was an agricultural company, I'd never done like agricultural video. They called me back a few weeks later. We got the job. And at that point, Crisp was born. We got our first client. I spent several months on farms with farmers.
Wow.
I was filming crops. I was filming like, peanut farms and watermelon farms. And like, I mean, I'm like the least farm boy person you'll ever meet, but I'm there doing it. And I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful that someone believed. And then, that the company was born. So if you can get one, you can get two. And it led to the second client, the third, the fifth, the 100th and beyond.
When did you finally know that it was going to be law, the legal profession that you were going to engage in?
So this was a couple years in. We actually had, so at the time we were working with like big brands like Coca-Cola, Verizon, Red Bull. We ended up getting a lot of really cool opportunities. And that's how really Crisp started out, in the sense that we were in the big brand space. We weren't working with like small business or like really smaller type organizations or professional service firms. We got a call from a lawyer. She was a phenomenal lawyer, but she had no online presence.
Yeah.
And she was really struggling to compete against big players, right? She didn't have the resources to do TV or radio or billboards, but she cared deeply about her clients. So what we ended up doing is we created a lot of great video content for her. We were able to like not only put this content on our website, but put it on the social platforms where there was a much lower barrier to entry than TV and radio and so on. And her firm exploded. And we did it for another firm and then another firm. And I, as I started to learn about the legal industry, I realized that, wow, this is a super competitive, super saturated market where like individual attorneys, like it's hard for them to differentiate and stand out. From a consumer perspective, they really can't tell one lawyer apart from another, right? Like they just don't know. Like they go to a website, it says super lawyer, but it says that on another website too.
Yeah.
So it's hard for them to tell them apart. And yet I also saw this big divide between these large advertisers that were many of them, like, respectfully, settlement mills or call centers, they didn't always care as deeply about their clients as some of these solos and small firms. And I looked at like what we were doing in the big brand space, for a committee at Coca-Cola with 40 people. And I'm like, I think we're focusing on the wrong group. Like we can really impact these people. So we started working with law firms. And then over the next couple of years, we focused in and said, that's it. That's the only like industry we're going to work with. Now today is the only work that we do. We work with over 1,000 firms. And it really started out with realizing that we have to help solos and small firms stand out because they care deeply about their clients. But it was also realizing the harsh truth that the best cases go to the best marketers, which is unfortunate because the best marketers aren't always the best attorneys. So we wanted to level the playing field.
It's amazing. You're so involved and deep in your work, and you've done the market research, and you brought us current. So incredible story. And like, it reminds me a little bit of, like I said earlier, like Gary Vee, like where you came from and like just doing your thing and just being importunate and working until you got to where you want to be. And like, you're still a young gentleman, Michael Mogill. So the things you're doing are incredible, man. So you wrote a book called The Game-Changing Attorney, how to land the best cases, stand out from your competition, and become the obvious choice in your market. So tell me, first off, like, what is a game-changing attorney?
Oh, wow. So I ask this question a lot. On my podcast, I always end with, what does it being a game changer mean to you? I think everybody has a different definition of that, right? Okay. So I think it's a personal, really kind of a personal answer, because being a game changer can mean, redefining the status quo. But to me, it really means that you are operating in alignment with your values. You're a person of high integrity. You believe in what you do and you're fully committed to it, right? Like you're all in. That's what it means, for me. But but different people, it means different things to them. But really, as a defining factor, I look at it as someone who helps others win and helps others succeed and prioritizes the success of others over the success of themselves. Like that to me is a game changer. And when I wrote that book, which the book came out in 2018, I mentioned I'm actually working on the second one. It'll be out this year.
What's the second book called? Is it The Game Changer 2 or what?
Oh,
if you don't have to tell us, you don't have to tell us.
We haven't announced it.
Oh, okay. All right. Never mind. We don't have to announce it here.
It'll be out in November.
Promote it for you when it comes out. But okay. All right. Got you.
Yes. So that, by the way, the first book, people ask me like, why did you write that book? Well, when we were like, let's say we were producing these videos, we were doing marketing, it was a pretty significant price point, right? Not everybody could work with us, but our goal was to be able to help as many law firms in America and beyond as possible. So I figured, why don't we just put everything we've learned into this book? It's kind of like the DIY book, like do it yourself. So you can know how to position yourself, how to like find the right focus, differentiate your firm, like do, all the type of marketing that we were doing for our firms, and just put it in book form. So I get like emails from people. I got someone like in Egypt emailed me. I got like,
isn't that amazing? Like you wake up to these emails from like, cause as lawyer stories, I wake up to these emails from people like everywhere. It's kind of cool, you know? So I'm
It's
sorry,
amazing.
somebody from Egypt emailed you and they were
Oh
like,
yeah, and he's like, "Wow, the book has been transformational for me," and I'm like, "Wow, that's amazing, right?" So it's like it's gone global now, right? And
that's
it's
awesome. Yeah.
and that's what so that book was very much kind of like the marketing, the brand, the positioning book.
Yep.
I will say this. So over the years, I feel like I did this backwards. And I'll give you some insight into the second book, because as we evolved as a company, when we started with the videos, that was really to help our firms differentiate themselves, stand out, like told their story, it would humanize them. The videos look like almost like movie trailers. And what that did was, when you put like for our firms, for many of them, we'd give them these videos and many of them didn't even know what to do with them, right? Like they could put them on their websites.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, how do I okay, what do I, do with this video? So that's when we launched the marketing. We're like, we'll
have this movie trailer, but where do I put it?
We're like outside of cocktail parties, right? It's like, what do you do? So we're like, all right, we'll promote it for you. So that's when we started the marketing stuff on like Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, beyond. But we realized something a few years back where it was like, okay, you can have a great video, you can stand out, and then you can get the phone to ring. However, and this is where I think I did this backwards. Like if you don't have, let's say, if you're not answering the phones properly, or let's say your culture's a mess, or you don't have a foundation in place, or there's no systems and processes, like if the business isn't aligned correctly, then the marketing doesn't work nearly as well. So as we grew and expanded, we realized that we've really got to help our firms become better leaders and like become better like CEOs and like business owners, because like the practice of law is not just a public service. I mean, you're running a business. So that's where we expanded into the coaching. And that's really what the second book is about. It's really about the business of law.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Super cool. Because I think that's so important, because a lot of people go to law school and they're not business people. Like they don't take business classes. They don't know, how to do the payroll or go be the rainmaker. So that's super cool. Your next book is about the business of law. That's amazing.
Well, and here's the thing I will add. So sometimes when you say the business of law, some people don't like that. They're like, wait a second, like this is a profession, right? This is a public service.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the two need to be, at opposing sides, like meaning that, can you really say you are the best lawyer to your clients if you're spread so thinly and you're exhausted and you're overwhelmed and clients aren't getting responded to in time and the service is off? Like, can you really say you're providing the best legal service? So I think that if you can run a great organization, you've got a great team, you've got great support, you can be a better servant to your clients.
Right. Oh, it's amazing. You've read the profession well, you've integrated with, and, the service you provide is very important to these firms. So here's a little question that's a little off, just shifting gears a little bit. So like, how do you like being a podcast host? Like, I know you have a podcast. I checked it out on YouTube, and like, so, cause I'm a podcast host now, like I moonlight as a podcast host. It says that Lawyer Stories is not my full-time job. I have a full-time job. So like, what is it that really satisfies you about like making lawyers even more successful? Like by being on your podcast? Because I love the images. Everybody should check out your podcast. I love your images. I love your, how they go on. You could see like people talking. It's just, you guys do a great job.
So the podcast, I think, has been transformative. I mean, without a doubt. We started a little over 2 years ago. We named it after the book, The Game Changing Attorney. So the Game Changing Attorney podcast. I have found, I'll tell you what, I have kind of joked that this is like one of the most selfish things I've ever done, because on the podcast, I get to speak to like some of the most incredible human beings, right? Just from the legal industry, beyond the legal industry. I get to ask them any question that I want. I get to learn from them. I get to like just learn and grow from like people, and just learning from, adversity they've overcome, mistakes they've made, insights they've gained. Like it's incredible. And that to me has been it's helped me grow so much. So I learned so much. And then we just happen to put that out publicly for other people to hear as well. So I think the benefit, or at least for me, of being a podcast host is that I get to learn so much from the people who come on the podcast, of people sometimes that I think if it weren't for the podcast, maybe, we would have never even been speaking, right? If I reached out to them and said, hey, can you grab lunch, like to Marcus Lemonis or something, you know what I mean? Or like Mark Lanier or whoever, they'd be like, well, no, like we're never going to grab lunch. Come on the podcast.
So they can tell you what they need. They can tell you what they need, like what they're looking for, what they're, how they need to grow their business. But make no mistake, Michael, like, you add a lot to that. They could learn some things from you and like your story. And I hope you get a chance, to tell what you've been through and how you've grown. to them. Like, you weren't really handed anything. Like, you know, you had to go through a lot of things to discover what it was that made you happy. So I think like that's really important too, to share with attorneys that you work with, because, you know, they know that you've had to sort of work for it. I think that's interesting, because when you get a chance to speak with these attorneys, you know what they need and you know how to serve them better.
I think we're all people, and Betty, I'm sure you've probably realized this time and time again, on your podcast, and even just through all the different stories, is that everybody, I'll tell you what, everybody I met, I don't care like what the outside perception is, whatever personal brand somebody puts out there, we all have our challenges, we all have our adversities. Like, there's for us to become the people that we became, we had to level up, grow, overcome something, basically we had to evolve as human beings. And I think that story of evolution is very interesting.
Totally. And I think it helps you recognize situations differently. Like, when you've been through a lot of different situations, you know how to sort of like read people and situations. So I think it's a great fit. So I want you to give us some advice. So give us some advice about how to overcome a no. Like, if you get a rejection, like somebody doesn't really want to buy a certain package that you have or whatnot, like, what do you do? Like, what's a no? Well, I mean, how do you overcome that?
So here's where I think this starts, and I'll give you kind of the mindset around it, and then like kind of a tactical approach, because I really do think everything starts with kind of how a mindset is the lens through which we see the world. So when I would hear no, and this, by the way, this only works if you really, really, really believe in what you do, if you believe in the work that you do and the people you help, because if you don't believe in it, it doesn't matter. Like, you yourself have to be sold on what you're selling. Yep. Okay. Before you can. So if you believe that like what you do truly helps and benefits people, when you hear no, I would think, well, maybe I just didn't explain it properly, right? Like, I feel that I failed to explain the value properly. I don't think they're saying no because they don't want to do it. I think they're saying no because I didn't articulate it correctly. There was some misunderstanding, and I failed. So I need to do a better job.
Okay.
So, and then sometimes no means like, okay, not right now. And that could just be a function of, of timing, right? Like, there's a situation where someone's like, well, when XYZ happens, I'll be ready. Or at least that's what they say they think will be the reason, right? But the other thing I learned is just with no is that if you stop at no, if I stopped at no, Chris wouldn't exist today. Right. If I stopped at no in front of that nightclub, I would have never, I would never become a photographer.
If you walked away, it was over, right?
That was, but here's what's interesting.
Well, you know what? Wait, I'm going to stop you right there. You know what's interesting about that? Because this is so weird. I heard in a clip. I just happened to hear a clip where your wife, I'm sorry, I forget her name right now.
Yep, Jessica.
You had one of your daughters like wanted you to change the channel on something, and you didn't say no, but you said something else. And so your daughter went to Jessica, and she was like, or her mom, and she was like, "Hey, Daddy said we couldn't change the channel," and Jessica was like, "Well, did he actually say that?" And she was like, "Well, no, he didn't say no." So she went back. So that actually kind of just like,
you gotta get it. So I just realized this, Benny, as we were talking about.
I don't mean to bring your family into it,
No, you're 100%. Because now, I mean, we're all these things that I learned painfully. We're trying to, raise our daughters with like growth mindset, and I want them to be able to stand on their own. But it's so fascinating to me as we were talking about this. What if I'm at that nightclub and that other photographer says we're good tonight, and I turn around and I don't come back in? Yeah. And when I'm wondering, what's crazy? Am I sitting at this podcast today?
No.
Like, it's just because then it wouldn't have led to me shooting that night, which led to them asking me to come back, which led to me then starting that photography company, which led to they're starting video, and then starting the corporate side, which led to Chris. You know what I mean? All those. So that's some powerful stuff to think about. So like, if you've overcome those no's, or you stick with it, right? Yeah. Now when you hear no, I think, well, what if you just stop, right? Like, that's how much of your future are you saying no to if you accept no, like, for an answer? Now, look, there's obviously times where someone's like, I'm not trying to like turn it into like, you being a pain in the ass to everyone. But I think if you accept no without like, giving it a little bit extra, right? A little bit more follow-up, like making sure, like, just continuing to push. If you just accept that, how much of your future are you missing out on potentially? Because for me at that time, if I would have just accepted what I heard at that nightclub, Chris wouldn't exist today.
That's right. So what advice do you have for a law firm who like needs to just up their branding? Like a lot of these attorneys are like old school attorneys, and like, they like to like, when I was in law school, I used to say like, oh, it's cool to be at the library at like 11 at night in the stacks, like with the books. And but like we're in this I think it's the 21st century, right? So like you know it, we're on computers, we have Instagram, Facebook, like, and some of these attorneys, which is incredible that they can go off people just sort of referring them, but some people want an online presence. So like if somebody really wants to revamp their look, like what advice can you give
Yeah.
to a firm that needs to really revamp themselves?
So I'd say a few things here. Number one, I think it's really important just because you have to consider it from a client's perspective, right? If they're trying to decide who do I hire, who do I work with, it's very difficult for them to tell one firm apart from another. So you have to differentiate and stand out somehow. And
Yes.
one of the best ways we found to do that is to tell your story. But in order to tell your story, you've got to be clear on your why. Like, why do you do what you do? So like, why did you become a lawyer, right? There could be different reasons. I mean, and hopefully it wasn't just to make money, maybe it was to make
Right.
a positive impact. Maybe you grew up and you were bullied and you hate bullies. Whatever the reason, that in itself, that humanizes you, right? That helps people understand, well, why is this person providing legal services, right? Like they've got a clear and powerful why. And then the other thing that I think is very important, especially today, is that if you try to be all things to all people, like if you don't clearly define your audience, because I've come across firms that say we're a criminal defense firm, family law, estate planning, personal injury, like, aviation law, like whatever, right? And it's like,
I love that you threw aviation law. That's incredible.
It's like wild to me, right? And when people go to their website, they're like, well, these people do everything, so they might not be great at anything. And then it's also, by the way, that's very, very difficult to market. You are better off saying that you are the motorcycle lawyer, right? Or the brain injury lawyer, or the trucking lawyer, or like the attorney that specializes in representing, let's say, like bars and restaurants, right? Like, or whatever it is, because then you can have a honed in audience, a clear message. And like, instead of trying to get everybody, right, just focusing on the clients that like are in your target audience, the ones you're, let's say are your ideal client, if you will. So I think those two things, being authentic, telling your story, and then also having a real clear audience, and really, it's not so much niching down, right? Because Seth Godin would say focusing up. But I would say, and I covered both in the Game Changing Attorney in the book, just saying that it's very, very difficult to compete. The more broad and general that you are, the more challenging it is, because that's when you're competing against like all the lawyers, right? So, but as you get narrowed in, now you stand out, and you're saying, okay, well, if I got an aviation case, we send it to this guy or this woman.
I think it's incredible that lawyers, I just think it's a great thing that you're doing, and telling people like how to really look at it, because they don't really think like that. They want to take on all these different cases, and it's just sort of like, it's good to have sort of a specialty, right?
Well, and here's the other thing about this, because there's going to be, I'm sure, people listening to this, and they're like, yeah, Mike, you say aviation law or maritime law or the trucking lawyer or motorcycle, but like, I'm not that person yet, right? Like, there's these great lawyers out there that are so well known as being the mesothelioma lawyer, or the traumatic brain injury lawyer. I will clue you in on a secret. Do you know how they became that, like the trucking lawyer or the motorcycle like accident lawyer?
How?
One day they decided that they were going to be that, and that's how they started marketing themselves. And that's all it took.
It's amazing. So today I could sit here and say, hey, I'm the X, Y, and Z lawyer, right?
You change your website, you align your messaging, and then you start marketing to that. And obviously it's almost like if you build it, they will come. But now you're like aligning to a specific audience. Now it helps. I will say, like, it's choose the things you're passionate about, right? Like, choose the things that like you really, really care deeply about, that you want to basically dedicate your life to, right? Like, I would not recommend choosing a specialty just for the sake of money, or just because it sounds good, right? Like, if in order to be really successful, like, Joe Fried, for example, who many know as the trucking lawyer, what many don't know is that Joe, on his way up to becoming that, was giving a presentation on trucking every single week for 10 years straight. So he gave over 500 presentations on trucking. And I got to say, you got to be obsessed in order to do that. Yeah. So I would recommend, if you're choosing a certain specialty or a certain practice area you really want to lean into, really make sure that that's something you want to dedicate yourself to. And there's a reason beyond money for doing that.
That's amazing. So Michael, I'm really enjoying this conversation, by the way. So can we switch gears for a moment?
Of course, we talk about anything.
What's up? All right. So
anything.
Let's talk about crisp events. Okay.
Okay.
So I was able to sit on last year's November event. My daughter was born in October, so I couldn't come down in November, right? It was just too much for me, right? So I got to say, that was like the best virtual event I've been to.
Yes.
I know you had some people there, but it was incredible. I mean, you could tell you put so much work into it. I saw, and so I have a regular full-time job, which I love. It's a great job. I could tell you about that another time. And so I had it going on in the background, right? And I saw your presentation. I happened to catch the day when you were presenting, and let me tell you, Michael, you were up there. So tell me if nobody's told you this before, bro. You give off major like Leonardo DiCaprio. Like in The Wolf.
Oh, no one's told me that before.
What's that?
No one's told me that.
So Michael Mogill, you were like Leo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street vibes, like not in like the negative way, of course, but like captivating the audience. Like you had the charisma, like the ambition. It was incredible. I was like, yo, this guy reminds me of like that movie that I saw like when I lived in New Haven. So it was awesome. Like you did a great job.
Thank you.
Pitching what you were, your your new packages and like what you were going to do. So it was great. And so like, tell us about like November 2nd and 3rd, like what's going on. You're doing it. I'm a big football fan. It's at the Mercedes-Benz. This is like the biggest place you've had it at in Atlanta. Super cool. You have some amazing guests. Tell us a little bit about it, man.
So, okay. So this is the Game Changer Summit. We started this off. We did the first one in 2018. We wanted to do like a law firm growth conference. Like we felt there was a lot of legal conferences. They were talking about like, trial skills, but there wasn't really like a business of law conference talking about like marketing and team building and culture and leadership. So we started this originally in 2018.
Yeah.
It had 500 people at the first one. We did it, crazy, right? We'd have like a DJ and like big production and big sound. And, it was kind of like the whole traditional model of the legal conference flipped upside down. Cause I would go to, I was going to like 15 plus conferences a year and I'd see people in the back on their laptops and on their, checking email. And I'm like, man, no one's paying attention. Like we got to do something exciting. So my theory when we did the first one was when people would walk in, either they'd see all this stuff and walk right out, or they'd be captivated for 2 days straight. And it ended up being the latter. So that led to the second Game Changer Summit the following year in 2019 at a little over 1,000 people. Then, as we know, there was a bit of a break between the second one and the third one because of something that happened in 2020, a little pandemic. And then, like what you said, in June of 2021, we did the virtual conference, like the Evolve Summit. And then, and then that November we did the third Game Changer Summit. So now going into this November, and Betty, I can tell you this will probably never happen again. I'll be completely honest. So this conference is in a stadium. So we outgrew every other venue.
Hey, why wouldn't it never happen again?
Oh, it's stupid. So to my knowledge, there's never been a legal conference in a stadium, right? This is where like the Super Bowl happened. This is where the Rolling Stones play. So we outgrew every other like venue in Atlanta. Like there's not a hotel ballroom that could accommodate more people. We had 2,500 people in person at the Game Changer Summit this past year, which was the maximum capacity at the Marriott Marquis. We had 5,000 on the virtual conference. So here, to have thousands and thousands of people in a stadium, when I say it'll never happen again, I can say that from an investment and economic standpoint, it's crazy. I mean, I'll put this in perspective, and I hope this comes across the right way for people listening. So for Mercedes-Benz alone, so we've never had to rent a venue because every time we do an event at a hotel ballroom, they would include that because we were getting a room block. But that's a little bit different with Mercedes-Benz. So it's $1 million just to have the venue space, but that's not counting anything.
Michael, are you telling me like you're not going to have your daughter's bat mitzvah there? Is that...
no, I don't want to ruin her. But this is, by the way, just for clarity, that's not counting any production. That's not counting any speakers. That's not counting any food. That's not even counting tables and chairs. So this is an event like with thousands and thousands and thousands of people that, you know, we're going to, I mean, I will say that we're really excited to do it because it's been a big challenge. It gets the team excited. Our aim is to make this like the best legal conference ever. But I will say, like, after this one, I think we will like return to, you know, a smaller scale event, because
what's
when you
it
get
like,
into
like 1 or 2 weeks before, like, your events? Like, are you like great, like just absolutely?
It's,
like,
I mean, the way I can describe it is like, it's I forget who told me this. I think it was James Lawrence, like Iron Cowboy. He's someone who did 100 Ironmans in 100 days, like in a row, right? And I asked him, I'm like, James, how do you like decide to like put yourself through that? And he's like, well, I never decide in the middle of a race, right? Because he always tells himself during he's never going to do it again. So it's the same thing with me. So like in that moment, like leading up to the event, I'm like, this is our last one. We're never going to do this again. It is exhausting. It is a tremendous amount of work. I always feel like,
but
no
you know what?
show
like
up.
you love it, man. I could tell by that smile on your face.
Well,
you like love the stress. Like,
well, it's incredibly.
like
I mean, it's incredibly rewarding. Like that in
Yeah,
itself, like it's. I mean, it's been rewarding because you create
Yeah.
this amazing experience for people, and they like build these relationships in the event. Like the people have like these transformative experiences, which at first I didn't believe. Like after the first event, I got emails from people saying that the event was transformative. And I was like, well, what do
Wow.
you mean? Because I thought we had great speakers, we had great food, and you know, and great production. But they're
Yeah.
like, no, you don't understand. I'm sitting there in the room, and I'm hearing what's being said on stage, and I decide at that point I'm going to make a change in my life, right? Like I'm going to fire my partner, or I'm going to open up my own firm, or I'm going to do whatever, right? And they're like, and if it wasn't for that moment, I would have never done that. Or I'm going to spend more time with my children, or I'm going to take better care of my health. So I'm like, wait a second, like you guys are having these kind of takeaways. So now
Yeah.
over the years, like when you create those types of moments for people, and then they build these bonds and relationships, because you know, you put people in a room together that are all just committed to being
Yes.
better, and they're entrepreneurial, and they want to make a great impact in their community.
And they do that. They
you know,
connect, man.
exactly.
Yeah.
And when you do that times like, you know, several thousand people, it's, I mean it when it's just such a magical moment that I think that creates the PTSD of what it takes to put the event together.
Wow, that's incredible. So, and I know you love it. I mean, the thing looked tremendous. Like when I was watching it. So like, what would be your advice for somebody who's like looking at this place, or a little overwhelmed? They're like, wow, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, like Atlanta Falcons, NFL. Like, should I go? Like, what would be your advice? Like, how do you get somebody over the hump to go?
So I will say this. I mean, our main focus on this event, like when we say it's a law firm growth conference, is it's realizing that there's a lot of changes coming into the legal industry. I mean, there's like really 3 main challenges that I think firms are facing. One is obviously more competition, like more firms coming into a market. It's more difficult to stand out. The other one is with like non-lawyer firm ownership and alternative business structures. You're starting to see consolidation, and you got these players coming into markets with tons of cash. So that's making it even more challenging. And then the final one is like succession and legacy planning. So for many law firms, it's like, what happens if you either step away one day, or if you were to pass, like, does that legacy continue beyond you? So those are some of the things that we address at this event, to where it's everything from how to, you know, to market effectively, to how to attract the right people into your organization, hiring, culture, and leadership, all those things. But for someone considering this, I will say that our first priority whenever we're putting the event together is really thinking about how do we make this the best experience, right? So we had an opportunity to take the event to a different convention center. We've had people ask to take the event to Miami or Vegas or whatever. This is not a destination type event. Like sometimes, I mean, no disrespect, when I see events like that, it's all about with a city where it's happening in, and like going out and, you know, and like drinking and all this other stuff. It's less about the content, the experience, the learning. So our event is really focused around like, hey, we want people to come back better than when they, you know, when they left, right? When they left their office, like we want them to come back a more dangerous lawyer, a more dangerous law firm owner, empowered, confident. So it's less about how many people will be there, and more about the fact that, like, experientially, our goal is like, you got to get people to feel something. Like, that's the
so
thing.
that was my question. Like, that was my next question, actually. Like, what is your goal with Game Changers?
Yeah.
Like, so tell me, like, you told me you wanted to have people feel something. Like,
yeah. So our vision at Crisp is, our 5-year vision has been that we want to help 1,000 law firms grow their revenues by $1 million each, right? By 2024. And the reason for that is that we found that when a law firm grows to $1 million in revenue or grows by $1 million in revenue, it really grows from like a solo or small firm to having really infrastructure in place. Things become repeatable, scalable, but now the impact they make and the number of clients they can serve in their community grows exponentially, right? Like instead of going and saying, we're going to help 100 clients, now we're helping 1,000 clients. And I think that if you believe in what you do, like truly you believe in the clients you help, I also think you have a duty to impact more people. So our aim is to help our firms grow to a point where they can, really scale their impact. So, I mean, that's really our goal at these events, in the sense that if you don't get somebody to have a moment where they're like, it's time, I'm going to make a change. And this is irrespective of whether they ever invest with Crisp or anything like that at all. I mean, you can come in, you can learn a lot of great things. You can come back, you can have a full action plan on how to do things better in your firm. But I say this in the sense that if you can provide somebody with the same information on a Zoom or a PowerPoint slide or whatever it is, and it's just going to go in one ear and out the other. Like you have to have this, almost like this call to action when you realize, okay, this is the moment. And then more importantly, it's less about what's even being said, but if you're surrounding yourself in a room full of people that are also committed, they're committed to doing better. They're experiencing the same challenges that you are. They're learning, they're growing. That's such a powerful bond that it creates the sense of community, saying, I'm not alone. Because sometimes people, they're coming in from all over the country, and locally, they're around people that are just complaining about things, and they're saying, well, this is BS and I can't change this, and this is unfortunate. It's just a bunch, skeptics and critics. But then they put themselves in this environment in Atlanta where people are talking about ideas and possibilities and like all the things they can do. So they just come back empowered and just ready to get after it.
And you want people just charging out of there, like ready to grow their firms and like super pumped, and like, that's amazing. Are you accessible like to these people and like your staff, and like if they have questions and that sort of thing, like people who go to the summit?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm there. We're doing some, I can't share it all just yet, but we're doing some great things at this one in November. We're going to do like we're doing an event at the end of day one. That's like an after party at the Crisp headquarters.
Really?
On day 2, we're doing something new. We will reveal that closer to the event. But the way the event is ending that at end of day, I think people really should stick around for that, because that's going to be something we've never done before. We're going to have a special, we're going to have a special guest performance at the end of the event. That's all I can say.
All right. That sounds awesome, man. So like Michael Mogill, like what motivates you?
So the real thing that comes back, and I give this a lot of thought, right? Because when we're working with firms and we're asking them that question, I find that it's helpful to have your own answer too. For me, it's, if you've ever heard the idea of like, your first day, when you die, right? And it's like, and you meet your maker, and it's like the basically the worst situation to be in, like this, like the first day of hell is when you meet the person you could have been, right? And if there's this huge disparity,
that's amazing. Go ahead.
of saying, well, it's like there's the way you ended up, but then it's like, imagine that you could have been like XYZ, like great father, like incredible member of the community who contributed and helped make other people succeed. So my aim, and I think this could be, this is just how I operate, is when you do meet that person, that you are one and the same, right? You shake their hand and you're like, that's it. Like whatever I was able to do, like the best version of myself I was able to become, the impact I was able to make, I did it. I left nothing on the table. And that to me is exciting. And it's not just in the business, right? Because I mean, people can grow their organization and like grow their team and grow their client base and make money. And, that's one thing. But I think it's about what about like your family? What about the relationship you have with yourself, with your health, all these different things. So, I'm constantly a work in progress, but I can say that what drives me is to be that best version.
So, okay, that's incredible. And I actually, if we both remember when we stop the recording, I want to ask you another follow-up question about that. Okay. But so like, what is your advice for an entrepreneur just starting out?
Yeah, well, where do I begin? I would say Elon Musk said something that I thought was interesting, where they're like, what encouragement would you give aspiring entrepreneurs? And he said something that's like, where if you need encouragement, it's not for you, right? But I will say, it's just realizing that you only really fail when you quit, and you only fail like when you give up. I think anything else is just a learning lesson. And I found that the people who can commit and stick with things, less about when they're motivated, but more in the fact of like, because motivation can be transient, right? Some days you wake up and you're motivated. Some days you wake up and you're not. But if you can be consistent, you can stick with it day after day. If you're making mistakes, that's fine. I've made hundreds of thousands of them, but if you learn and if you learn from them, as long as you don't give up, I do believe you eventually get there.
Yeah. Awesome. So is there anything else you'd like to share with the Lawyer Stories community? I know we covered a lot of stuff.
Oh, listen, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I would just say, look, if someone is interested in the Game Changers Summit, they can go to crispsummit.com. If they're interested in learning about CRISP, they can go to crisp.co. But just overall, I would just say, like I listened to a lot of the episodes. I think it's incredible to learn from other people. And I will say it's just incredibly inspiring. It's the same thing. Like when you believe you are alone and you believe that you have all these challenges and so on, I can tell you with confidence, you are not alone. And, a lot of the people that you respect and you admire, those same people had to overcome a lot of challenges, a lot of adversity. They themselves probably doubted themselves, but they stuck with it. Right. So, for anybody that looks up to someone, I would just say, really try to figure out what were their habits, and try to model those versus viewing it as something where it's like, well, I could never achieve that, or I could never be this person. I think that's completely off base.
Well, why do you think most startups or entrepreneurs fail?
Well, probably for a lot of reasons. One, there's probably, very early on, there's probably a lack of commitment, right? So meaning do they really stick with it? And sometimes people get bad news and that's enough, right? Like they get told no at the nightclub, they turn around, they go home, and that's the end of that dream. That's one reason. And then, the other aspect is it's like, when we think about what commitment really is, it's not so much what you have to do, how many hours you have to work, all that kind of stuff. I think commitment is really, what are you willing to give up? Okay. And for me, when I was building CRISP, I will say it's not very popular today. That people are like, what did it look like when you were growing the organization? And I say Saturday and Sunday. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, Monday through Friday is a given. Saturday. So it was Saturday and Sunday too. And that's what the first 5 years were.
Yeah. So why should anybody attend this summit that we're having in November?
So, I'll give you a reason not to attend. I'll flip it. Look, if you're not, let's say interested in growing your law firm, if you're not interested in, things like, attracting great people into your organization, team, culture, leadership, mindset, the business of law, if all these things you're thinking, this is not for me, I'm not interested, and you're ready to just sail off into the sunset, it's probably not for you. But I think if you are more so interested in how do I not just survive, but thrive in this new legal landscape, I think that's probably a very good reason to attend.
Awesome, man. Hey, do you have anything else you would love to share with the Lawyer Stories community?
Well, I think that's pretty much it, other than just everyone should go back and listen to every episode of Lawyer Stories.
I appreciate that, man. So, hey, Michael Mogill, just an icon in our legal community. So thank you so much for spending all this time with us. We really appreciate it. It was so cool to finally chat with you. And I hope you'll stay right there for just a minute. And everybody else, wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves. Cheers.